As we move through the final half hour of our show here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM. For the first time this year, we welcome back our friend Yaël Ossowski of the Consumer Choice Center, host of the Consumer Choice radio show, which airs at 10 a.m. on Saturdays here on the Big Talker FM. Yaël, was it too early to play this as the in-cue of our conversation here on this Friday? Too early for this tune from the Talking Heads, Burning Down the House?
Yeah, it might be a bit too soon. I hope there won't be any more fires for the moment. But let's hope for peace and good things to come in the next couple of weeks. But great to be talking with you, Joe.
Well, I mean, yeah. Last year, we weren't really dealing with it here in the States, but there were missiles flying and airliners getting shot down. It was Iran, I believe, that was engaged in that World War III activity that we didn't necessarily play out the first week of the new year 2020. So only we could think what is going to happen here through the rest of the 51 weeks left in 2021.
Yeah, it's a nice little barnstorming to begin the year. Definitely, I know that you've been busy at the phones all week. You've had a lot of people calling in. I know your fingers have been pretty busy, and your mouth has been busy too, Joe. So I know a lot of people there in the Cape Fear region really have a lot to say, and it's been great to listen all week, by the way. So I think very educated listeners. They're definitely following the news, and I think they're getting a lot of their information from here and from many other sources. So that's great.
And ultimately, we're just trying to use this platform as a sounding board, so we could learn what many people are thinking and their thoughts on the day and the issues of the hour, but also trying to frame it in many different ways. I mean, Yaël, you know my beliefs, you know the people I support, the stuff that goes with me and doesn't flow with me. You know me fairly well, and I've tried to do my best over the last couple of days to try and put it all into perspective. And I hope and there are always going to be haters out there. And there are always going to be lovers out there, and I'm trying to find some middle ground here. Not that I want to make anyone happy, but I just want to try and get my viewpoint out without having, ultimately to stir things up a little bit, but also to truly lay out some, common sense type of thought in this chaotic world that we're living in.
Yeah, I think the thoughts that we've heard all week from many of your listeners and other people is, there's different ways to interpret what's happening. I mean, I saw the barnstorming at the Capitol in pretty dire terms, if you ask me. I know that some people might disagree, and I know your last caller talked about, as a way that they can have their grievance heard. I think there are better ways than pushing down Capitol Hill police officers and rummaging through the gates and breaking into offices. I think that's a whole other concern. But man, it really is an exit for President Trump. I mentioned this on the Consumer Choice radio program that'll air this weekend. It's kind of like that flight attendant who had just had it with his job. He took the 2 bottles of champagne, popped the corks, and slid down the emergency slide and gave the finger. That's what I feel like this kind of final few weeks of the Trump administration is kind of like, is just really giving that fat middle finger to all norms, all expectations of what presidents are supposed to do. And it was a pretty scary moment, really back on Wednesday. So I think it gave us a lot to think about. And I don't know if it'll go back to normal, as you mentioned and as your caller said before, but things are going to be turned down a notch. It'll go from about 11 to probably about 7, I think.
With that said, I would refer to the movie Half Baked when the guy at the Spanish guy out of the trio or the quartet that is in the movie Half Baked, if you ever saw it from the college days, and he's like, F you, F you, F you, I like you, F you, I'm out. That's the comparison.
You're cool.
I would use.
Yeah. Wow, Joe, great reference. You've made it to my top 6 on MySpace now that you've made that reference. I love it.
And obviously it's it's, you want to compare it, you could say it's apples to apples, oranges to oranges. Those lawmakers, though, whether which we don't condone the violence, I get it. Those lawmakers did, though, Yaël, and maybe you agree, maybe you don't. Did get a little taste of a lot of business people have been feeling like for a year as they watched their businesses crumble, whether it be through rioters and looting or government overreach. Got a little taste of what life has been like in Middle America for the better part of 10 months.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that there's been a lot of pain in communities, specifically having visited Wilmington, just a few months ago and having seen, that not even being able to have a beer outside because of the regulations and so many other businesses that are shut and really no plans to get them back open and to allow people to safely open, which is a travesty. Really, though, when it comes to storming the Capitol, again, I'm all in on petitioning government. I'm all in on the freedom to assemble. But when you kind of do it in this haphazard way, and look, I don't think this was an evil, conniving plot. We saw many of the photos and images of people walking through in an orderly fashion between the velvet ropes. But this was done because of an egging on of President Trump, and we can't forget that. And we don't have that power, Joe. You or I don't have that power. You have the power of broadcasting, no doubt, but you don't have the kind of moral position of being the president of a country. And I saw whatever I saw on my television. To me, I didn't weep. Believe me, I've wept many a days and nights in the last year, not just because I'm a young dad, but also because of just what's happened in the country. And, to sort of see whatever you think about decorum, whatever you think about the rule of law, to kind of see the Capitol invaded like that, which is a seat of government. I'm someone who detests government power as much as anyone else. I think it was just a step too far. I think it really is, to me at least, a little bit of demagoguery. We saw what happened with Trump. It was a lot about passion and people, and what happened at the very end. Trump came out in a very nice little whatever it was, press conference or video, and basically reneged on everything that he had said. So I know there are a lot of people who are very passionate about this. I would hope they would turn all of their anger, their spirits, their inspiration, their passion, turn it to really trying to change the country. I think that's what I've been trying to do. That's what my colleagues do. That's what you do, Joe. I think there are better ways to do it, and there are ways to protest, and there are ways to use the market to actually deliver people alternatives. You don't necessarily need to be barnstorming the Capitol. And I know there's a lot that's been said and written on that. I saw it as very upsetting. We don't want that. We don't want that in Raleigh. We don't want it in D.C. We do definitely want a revolution in the way we think about policy and the way that we want the country to move forward. And I think that's why you and I both, Joe, are very active in what we do every day.
I think the sentiment for a lot of people, as it kind of has bubbled over, well, the election obviously did not go the way that Trump supporters would have hoped. But I think that was kind of the straw or the final cherry on top for the better part of Yaël 4 years. Supporters of President Trump have taken it on the chin. Marriages have been broken up. Siblings are not talking to one another based on one guy's rise to the top of our highest level of government. And for 4 years, they felt they never got a good shake. And again, not to talk about the Capitol and what went on there, but when 400,000 people turn out to support the guy with the election, and I think they're. Not that the election would have been turned over, and it wouldn't have. The certification was going to move forward Wednesday, no matter what. They had the votes and whatever. They had the numbers. But I think when it comes to the election process, Yaël, we've laid out many cases here through 4, 5, 6 months that are troubling when it comes to how states circumvented their own laws to move forward with it making it easier one way or the other. I know you're a big proponent of mail-in ballots, and you cast a ballot through email here in the United States. What was it, Cabarrus County? I think, though, it went really quickly, and when the judges and there are lawyers changing laws, does that not circumvent what law and order stands for, the integrity of our elections?
In a way, yes. And I did hear that argument on the House floor on Wednesday. But again, this was not what was being discussed in the time after the election, right? This is something that was brought up in some weeks prior. And some state legislators, principally in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, in Georgia, did bring that up. And I do think it's at least something to debate. But we don't have government by state legislators, and we don't have government by Congress only. We have divided government through different branches that interact and really figure out how we interpret the Constitution and how it kind of messes with our daily lives and whether laws can be considered constitutional. I think there'll be a lot of bickering, but this was brought up in courts again and again. that's maybe a question to revisit in the future because courts can only act on legislation and the Constitution. They can't really make their own decisions, and we don't want them to necessarily. We don't want them to be able to create their own laws and be legislating from the bench. That's something that particularly a lot of center-right people have been very critical of many people who are promoting this kind of judicial philosophy, and that's why Amy Coney Barrett was able to fly through her Supreme Court confirmation, is because she did not believe in that either. I think there's a lot there. A broader point, Joe, is that it's an interesting thing about it matters who your social circle is and who you really think the quote opposition is, right? Because I think there are a lot of people in North Carolina who are tuned into MSNBC all day. Believe me, I have plenty of these people in my life, and who have one idea of who the opposition is, and then you have others who might listen to talk radio or might watch Fox News and have another idea. And it really is this kind of strange thing where everyone's kind of right. There are centers of power. Academia definitely tends to tilt left. Large media organizations tend to tilt left. Hollywood is left. And then generally the people are center right. And this is the kind of balance that we have to try to rise against. It's not to say that we burn the whole thing down, but it's to recognize that and figure out how we can tailor our message and better our message so that we can get through to these people. I think this, fear of the other is a big thing that's discussed, but the oppositions, whether real or imagined, thinking about that and finding ways to actually really come together with people we disagree with on various policy stuff, I think is going to be really important in the next couple of years. I think for fans of divided government like myself, I'd love to see the institutions sort of fight against each other because I think that's the best way to preserve liberty. It's really going to be an interesting fireworks show. But I think everything the last 4 years have taught us is that now we have the information, we have this in history, we can say, okay, we understood what happened when various sectors of the government went against the president, when you had foreign intelligence agencies trying to penetrate things and our own domestic intelligence agencies both going against them and the president and the executive. I mean, there's so much that has happened in the 4 years. I think people are more enlightened. I do think that might change things, hopefully for the better. But we never know these days, Joe. All that we can hope for is that people can become more informed, that people can continue to exercise some of the liberty that we've been granted as American citizens by the grace of God or the Constitution or whatever you might believe in.
Well, having followed, of course, the world of politics as work for the better part of 20 years, it is always one of those times, when your side, if you want to put it that way, takes one on the chin, that there's a time there where you feel a little shell-shocked, you got a little bit of a gut punch, and then there is a way in which you kind of figure out what your identity is going to be moving forward. What does the Republican Party look like moving forward? There are a lot of young people, well-known people within the realms of the GOP, people that are in the rank and file right now, coming up through state legislators or even analysts and pundits out there, particularly young people, I think, that are going to guide the right long after all of this is said and done. When we talk about Trumpism, 70 million people voted for the guy. Yaël, it's not going anywhere. I mean, that they are going to have a say as to what goes on right side of the political scale, I think, for a long, long time. It's not going anywhere. The MAGA, if you want to label it as that, those types of mindsets. I mean, I'm one of those types of mindsets that says we need to be doing things like calling out the World Health Organization, sticking it to China, trying to lower the tax burden on American citizens, making sure that our borders are secure. These are all things that President Trump, bigger than the man, the policies that many of these people support.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely a lot of things that certainly I agreed on with Trump and many of my colleagues did. When it comes to the World Health Organization, that's definitely it. Really, when it comes down to getting rid of the huge administrative regulatory state and getting rid of the burdens for many of our businesses and for consumers as well, so we can lower prices. But the trade wars and everything else were also disastrous. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us, especially if you're interested in politics and you believe in your ideas, look at what's happening in your local community. I know you hit upon that message a lot, Joe, and I think for the GOP in North Carolina, There might be a lot of people who might feel defeated after Election Day, but look, Republicans still control the state legislature in North Carolina. There's still a lot of things that can be done. As far as I know, most regulations that impact your daily life are right there at the local level, and there's a lot that can be done. I don't know what's going to happen with the influence of someone like Madison Cawthorn, who's from out in Hickory there in the western part of the state, who's definitely an influential voice now in the guy's almost a decade younger than me now. Someone's going to be very influential in Washington, and we have to try to ensure that these are the type of people that we can influence in our own state. And I would hope it would be towards a way that will allow more freedom for individuals, for consumers. But it's not a total defeat if you are a center-right minded person or a philosophy. There's a lot of great momentum that we have, especially in North Carolina. There's a lot of great things that we can still do here. We can get rid of the ABC monopoly. We can try to lower taxes. We can try to promote things like school choice, things that are already being done at the state level and may accelerate. Obviously, Governor Cooper will be an obstacle for much of that, but there are always tools and methods, and I think really the people of North Carolina have it within us to try to change that locally. We can keep our chins up. There's a lot of great things to fight for, and it doesn't end just because of an election and a new year. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can really be hopeful about.
And with that said, to put it in perspective, that we always encourage people to live their lives, that the political world government, and this is the large case I try to make to people who are on the left that believe more government, more centralized power is the way to go. We need more, bigger, and more taxes and more regulations on this, that, or the other for whatever reason. Mainly those ideals on the left side of the spectrum. That if we compartmentalize this and we have more of a limited government, which propels more freedom and individuality and more of that core community-oriented spirit. We're not looking up to Washington to be the be-all and end-all, and that's kind of where the divide is in my mind, and in some cases, because President Trump, I know, stretch of the imagination, was a fiscal conservative as to the way he went about his business. You can look at the national debt, but I think for myself, fundamentally, who is tight with my wallet because, well, one, I don't have much money. Maybe that's the reason why I'm tight with my wallet. But nonetheless, I would like my government to act the way kind of I do and the way in which I try and deliver my everyday life.
Definitely, and I don't even think it's an ideological point. I think it is a uniquely American point of view that we believe that we can flourish the best when we have the least amount of burdens, whether they be regulatory or legal or otherwise. I think we have that in our country. It's in our blood. It's why we're looking at the newest, richest person in the world right now is Elon Musk, who was born in South Africa and who made his way to the United States of America, and now the richest person on the history of the earth because of his innovations, because of his ability to actually deliver through entrepreneurship. That's something that was not done, at the ordering of some government bureau. It really was because of the sheer creativity and individualistic nature of our country that allowed that to happen. So I really see that we can do that in so many different areas. Again, it's not going to matter who occupies the White House or the State House or anything else. We really just need to make sure that people can make their own decisions for themselves and their families. And look, the people are doing that on their own anyway. A lot of things might come from the governor's office telling you you're not allowed to do this and that. But people know how to live their lives safely and responsibly. We can continue on doing that, Joe. I know we faced some dark days in 2020 together. We were able to share some laughs and some drinks over some of them, but now we can move forward. A lot of great momentum. Big Talker's doing well. I think the state's doing well, and the country will do well again.
I got to say, though, not as well as the freedom-loving state of Florida. Talk about, oh, man, I only said it once today. I said it 10 times on Monday coming off the break. I've weaned myself down to just one time today. Boy, do I love the Sunshine State. Talk about bureaucracy.
And so many snowbirds, all the same. So I totally agree.
Especially snowbirds, literally from north of the border. Too bad that. Well, that's why maybe I liked it a little bit better when I went down there just a little while ago. There were no Canadians down there driving. The worst drivers in the world. Canadians, by the way.
The English Canadians, I totally agree.
Hey, lastly, you talk about bureaucracies, and if there's any case to talk about why we need more limited government, obviously 2020 will show us the prime example number one with the rollout now of the vaccinations, the whole COVID lockdown. I mean, this should be like plastered everywhere. Think you want more government? Look to 2020 and how it ruined everyone's lives over the science and the data. When we look at how these bureaucracies are rolling out the vaccinations across the country, I mean, how are other countries, and is it to no surprise that they are blasting past the United States as far as getting their populations vaccinated much more quickly and efficiently, outside of maybe the freedom-loving state of Florida, the U.S. Trailing many other countries in getting the vaccinations out to the people who need it most?
Yeah, it's the most interesting paradox ever. You have the great American machine of innovation that is able to collaborate internationally and come up with vaccines. And the second that it hits the bureaucracy, it sinks, it's slowed down. You have Andrew Cuomo, who comes with a nice five-finger slap on the whole process, trying to charge fines for people who don't give the vaccine in an orderly fashion. It's been really bad to see in some states. I know that in California and Oregon and even New Hampshire, they're talking about racial equity as an important measure of who will get the vaccine first. All this kind of stuff is what happens when we just allow government to grow too large, and then it's all ideology and political concerns that will govern who gets that jab in the arm. And I think that's really sad. If we look at Israel, if we look at the United Arab Emirates, even the United Kingdom, they're actually able to vaccinate so many more people. You have to imagine, the UK did not produce the vaccine that everyone is using now, at least the Pfizer vaccine. And yet they were able to approve it first. They were able to get people to have that vaccine first. And the United States is lagging behind. I know states like Florida are doing a better job. They're doing it in a decentralized way, empowering hospitals to do it. But we need to allow pharmacies to be handing this stuff out. And you know what? Maybe we do need to sell it at $10 a pop so we can figure out a better way to distribute this. Because the way it is now, it's a total bottleneck. We don't want an Andrew Cuomo type personality figuring out whether or not you're going to get the vaccine, because you're always going to end up a loser in that situation. But let's look at innovation. Let's look at all the awesome decentralization. I know you've seen the memes, Joe, but if we were able to hand over distribution of the vaccine to something like CVS or Amazon or even Uber Eats, it would be way more impressive and I guess be out in a much better way than it is now. So I do hope we can continue to innovate, and hopefully by March, Joe, we can have this conversation in the studio because all restrictions will be done, everything's back to normal, everybody's vaccinated up, and we can finally get on with business and get out of this terrible dark age, this dark cloud that emanated from Wuhan, China so many months ago.
So figuratively, we should be burning down the house, not physically, as to sum up our conversation this morning.
Or build as many houses as possible. Okay. Unlimited supply.
I like burning down things. No, I'm just kidding. Yaël, it's always a pleasure, my friend. I can't wait to catch up next week.
All right. Thanks so much, Joe. All the best.
Consumer Choice Radio airs, of course, on Saturdays right here at 10 a.m. on the Big Talker FM.